So we are moving through visible crisis, very Virgo, within the collective right now. And tensions are rising. There's a lot of exposure that is unfolding, and systems are under pressure. And this Virgo lunar eclipse, with all of this happening, it calls us somewhere quieter within into a personal restructuring. And this is really a moment for each one of us to trust our instincts and refine our foundations and rebuild from within. And it's important. Why is this important? It is because each one of us are connected to the collective conscious or unconscious. This is a Pisces dynamic. And with this Virgo lunar eclipse happening on March 3rd, tomorrow, it is highlighting this karmic ending, what's wanting to be closed, the chapter that's wanting to be closed in order for the restructuring to occur that's seen with the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries, now ruled by Mars. So I want to talk about this on a collective level, and then I want to really talk about this on a personal level. The US had there were airstrikes on Iran, and this happened when Mars squared Uranus and Taurus for its final time in that sign. And it was at the same degree as the Aquarius solar eclipse. So it was a trigger point. And whenever we see planets hit the trigger points of eclipses, things tend to happen. Those dynamics seen um, within the eclipse archetypally is confronting us and making us aware. And this is a time where we are really starting to become aware on a collective level because what has been denied, Virgo, for a long time is wanting to wrap up in order for us to honor the actual truth of what is going on. We see this collectively right now, but I also want you to think back to what have you been working on since 2007? March 3rd, 2007, there was an eclipse at 12 degrees Virgo. It was lunar, and this is a sorrow cycle. It is the same degree on the same day 19 years ago. It's a full nodal cycle that we're seeing. It's the ending of a nodal cycle um, that we're seeing with this eclipse. And so I want you to think about what are the key dynamics you have been working on. If you are someone who has a lot of mutable influence in your chart, this is going to impact you on a more conscious level, I would say, or on a more in a more direct way. But I bring up the airstrikes because just to demonstrate this point, last year in June was the first time that the US had airstrikes against Iran. Not the first, but this started this dynamic where President Trump, same thing. And Mars was aspecting Uranus at a trigger point. Excuse me, no, it wasn't. Mars was at a trigger point for the eclipse that happened on March 14th. Um, Whenever this happened in June of 2025. Whenever Mars is connected to Uranus, though, this is where we get explosive wars. And I want to say right now, America's natal Uranus and its natal chart is at 8 degrees Gemini, and it is squaring the transiting nodal axis. So there is dynamic tension, and we are reliving key dynamics, and there is a reckoning on a national level happening right now. We had our Pluto return in 2022. And Pluto then squared the nodal axis in Aries and Libra. And this was a choice point for us to get our shit together. And yet, because of the over identification with the masculine principle, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, I've talked about it the other week, there wasn't remediation. We chose to still um, give our authority over wanting to stay powerful, wanting to stay the biggest, the most top dog. And there was a lot going on in the country, and we chose falsely in an indiscriminate way our leadership. And that really reflects the values of this nation right now. Okay. And I'm going to get into this even further um, pertaining to this because this is important. Before that, I want to say with Uranus squaring this nodal axis right now, we're seeing the effects of, as a whole, as a collective consciousness within America, which I know not all of you guys that watch me are from America, but to me, this is important because how things have been structured on a global level is one nation vying for all the power, and that is the overemphasis on the masculine principle. The masculine and the feminine principles are neutral, they occur in all of us. One is not bad, good, wrong, right. They're meant to be harmonized and to be um, expressed naturally. But when one or the other becomes extreme, that's when distortions play out. And we're seeing extremes play out on a cultural, divisive, Uranus, Gemini, distorted level, where there is persecution, South Node of Virgo, and disillusionment galore, stemming from misapplied choice making, a lack of discernment on a national level. And it's not everyone who, most people who are watching this, this is just gonna validate for you, right? Um, but in April, Uranus is going to ingress into Gemini. And then on July 3rd, Mars and Uranus are going to meet in the sky and conjunct. And historically, when this has happened through transit in America's chart, there has been war, explosive war of some type. This happened with Hiroshima when we dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan. This same aspect was seen whenever there was the Civil War. And this is a really big dynamic. What we're seeing right now and why America is being talked about is because whenever there is this over-identification with this masculine principle, that means that there is an over-identification with the value of power. And if one is over-identified with power, that means that in order to keep the power, which one will be afraid of losing if there's the over-identification, then there will be a subjugation of others. We can see this on personal levels with people, and we can see this on a collective level. And something I often think of is that my teacher, I was watching a lecture of his from 1994, years ago, probably 8 years ago. It was at the very beginning of my nodal square. And he talked about one day we will be a nation among nations. And this is that collective reckoning. This is that experience on a collective level where we are, I've heard people say that they feel humiliated by what's going on. So it's a humbling experience, right? And humility and a humbling experience happens when there is an excess and an over identification with um, egoic tendencies, power, misapplied power, overpowering, um, exclusion, all of these dynamics, or wanting to be the best. And, even you can feel victimized because you're not acknowledged for being the best, but yet, like, there can be a humbling experience even within that dynamic. So it's important for me to highlight this because the other thing I want to say is the first lunation after these eclipses is a Pisces new moon. And there are trigger points being activated with that Pisces new moon. Mercury is going to be conjunct the lunar north node. It will still be retrograde. The lunar north node is still going to be at 8 degrees. It's hanging out at, this nodal axis is hanging out at that 8-degree mark. So this is the same degree that is with both of these eclipses that one that we just had, one that we're about to have. And that's also Mercury is the ruler of the lunar south node, but yet it's conjunct the lunar north node. So this is really where we're wanting to culminate these Virgo experiences in order to cultivate healing, but yet it's really where we're needing to discern and not be indiscriminate about how we go about doing that. The other dynamic with that new moon is that Mars, what I just talked about, will be at 12 degrees Pisces. So it will be conjunct where the sun is during this lunar eclipse, meaning that it's going to be triggering through opposition the lunar eclipse degree. And this is where things are going to be highlighted and clarified. Personally, this can be, a, it can be a good aspect unless you have like unchecked anger. You have denied, avoided the Virgo things around creating, cultivating action, especially through your own self-actualization, right? But yet it can still be a clarifying aspect. Typically, if you've been doing this, it's going to be a really good new moon, right? It's going to birth something that's been gestating that you have had a dream about, that you've been inspired about, and there can be this courage to really act on it. But pertaining to this situation that we're in, on a global level and definitely here in America, that can be a trigger point to confront, especially Americans and then also the rest of the world with what is really highlighted in this lunation. So, what is this lunation about? So often with Virgo, we talk about victimization. And yes, it is definitely an archetype of Virgo. And to me, it's a dangerous archetype. Because why does victimization happen in the first place? It's because of an over-identification with power and valuing it, and so subjugating others on some level, right? It's where abandonment and betrayal happen. It's where we interject our own dynamics into other people because we are not wanting to deal with them. This runs the gamut. Victimization, when one is actually victimized, which is a universal experience, what can happen is we can cross into territories of when we don't deal with it, there can be a crossing into the territory of then becoming a person who victimizes others, right? These are things and themes that are highlighted. Mercury retrograde in the sign of Pisces during this lunar eclipse is where we can see people have a breakdown in their communication, where their mental faculties are breaking down. It's also where, for some of us, if it's not so extreme, it can be we haven't been taking care of ourselves. We have been doing this, that, and the other, very, very busy Virgo, like not getting enough sleep, not taking care of our health, not doing what it is that we're feeling called to do to nurture ourselves, um, pertaining to, uh, our creativity or our enjoyment. Um, it can be also because we look around and it's like, I don't even feel like I deserve to experience that, a Virgo dynamic. And yet, Mercury retrograde in the sign of Pisces, if it is naturally being expressed and we consciously work with this energy, it can be extremely inspiring. We can receive messages from on high about solutions. We can um, have things come into our consciousness about what it is that we're actually meant to be Virgo improving. And we're needing to honor that internal message that we're receiving and that guidance and that wisdom from our own soul in order to mitigate crisis. So this really highlights on personal levels our day-to-day schedules, what's going on in the home, your family, how you're taking care of what you need to take care of in your home with your kids, with your animals. Virgo is the archetype of domesticated animals, so our pets, our career, our work? Is there a good balance of pleasure and nurturing on a soulful healing level, or are we doing, which is more of a feminine principle, or are we doing the over identification with action, um, bulldozing, not resting, um, hyper independence, or even victimization itself, right? These are things that are coming up because this is a closing of a karmic chapter that started back in 2007, where we've been purging all of these dynamics, those Virgo things that you felt like you were freaking done with, and it's like gum on the bottom of your shoe, and you thought that you cleaned it off, but there it is again, and you feel stuck to the ground, right? That is a Virgo experience. And it's because Virgo wants to purge. It wants to purify. It is naturally sextile Scorpio in the zodiac. There are things on a soul level. Each one of us has Virgo on a house cusp in our chart and Mercury, right? But this dynamic is on a soul level. We all come here to do something. We each have a purpose, an evolutionary intention, Pluto. And on this journey, what are we doing to improve, to evolve? It is through improvement, especially through our own emotional dynamics, the moon, Pluto, Pisces. And when we come into an awareness about our inner dynamics, it takes time. It's not a one and done deal. It is a step by step, moderate approach that takes patience and temperance, right? It's teaching us that we do have time and space to work within, and that we're not going to be Virgo perfect, that there are nuances to what it is that we're experiencing and what it is that we came here to do in order to evolve. Yet, one chapter right now is wanting to be closed. It is wanting to be purged. It is wanting to be completely purified through the culmination. And that is definitely seen with this lunation and also the ruler of this lunation being in the sign of Pisces, retrograde. There's something we are resolving, right? And later in the month, Mercury is going to conjunct that North Node on that new moon. There's food for thought. We also have Mars and Pisces. Mars is our conscious desires that emanate from within our soul, where our unconscious desires are held within Pluto. Mars and Pisces is wanting us to tap into our intuitive, instinctual functions in order to connect with what it is that the soul is inspiring to do in order to co-create on a collective spiritual level right now. And it can be small. Virgo, it can be something as small as adjusting your attitude in the day to day, closing the chapter of how you once related, how your attitude was in situations, right? I just had this experience with my car. I had to get a new one. It was right after the eclipse that trined my Venus, by the way, and my Venus is in the sixth house. And instead of me feeling that this was a crisis, because out of nowhere, and ironically, the day before I even said, like, this car has been so, um, you know, uh, reliable and blah, blah, blah. I didn't get upset or angry. I got scared for a second because all of a sudden there's an extra expense. I had just paid my car off and, all of these things. But I didn't let that fear run the show. What I did is I was like, I'm trusting myself. This is going to be okay. And there was a couple of dynamics that I had to cultivate discernment. Should I go through a dealership? Should I go over here? What is best for my budget? What is best for this, for my kids and what I'm doing? And yet my attitude the whole time was very much, it's gonna be okay because I trust myself and I know that I'm capable. And it was a 9 day ordeal. It was a long, drawn out kind of process. It wasn't, oh, my car messed up and I'm going to get a car. There was a lot of hoops that I was jumping through. And that's because during this time, with Saturn conjunct Neptune, Neptune being the ruler of that North Node, Neptune and the North Node are speaking and reflecting to, and even your own natal Neptune, by the way, is indicative of this because it rules that North Node. It speaks to the actual choices we are needing to make right now, in order to evolve those past experiences dealing with the Virgo South Node, right? And the issues are going to be seen wherever that south node is falling in your chart by house. And it's going to be seen in your own natal Mercury and transiting Mercury, what it's aspecting in your chart, right? But the choices are that Neptune. And right now, Saturn is in a new phase with Neptune. And Saturn is the holder of time and space. It's about emotional maturity. It's about the ability to apply wisdom from past experiences. It is about emotional maturation process. And so we can be tested through Saturn around a very Saturnian archetype of self-determination. How are you going to take action, Aries, when something comes up? And there are things up for review, especially over the next 2 weeks. It's going to be highlighted, especially with Mercury retrograde. And then over the next 6 months, when we see planets hit these trigger points, right? um, there's going to be test. And Saturn and Neptune, there is this new structure that is wanting to evolve within each one of us. Our consciousness, how we relate to ourselves, what our attitude is, what's our self-talk. Are we rooted in a more victimized place, maybe masochistic? I know I used to be. I deserve this. Um, Things are only going to improve if they're so extreme or so bad first. Um, you know, this kind of underlying core theme was um, suffering was a badge of honor, right? Like I don't grow unless I'm suffering, or I only felt good about myself whenever I was in a crisis because the crisis was, I knew that it was the thing that was going to help me. And really the delusion in that is crisis only happened because I was denying what I needed to do and what was going on, because on some subconscious level I felt that I deserved to have a crisis in order to get my shit together. And now I'm happy to say not really the case anymore, right? And that is part of this Uranus and Taurus um, that we've been experiencing since 2018. There is this radical transformation of our inner relationship to self and how we're relating. And Uranus is sextiling its ruler, Venus, in the sign of Pisces during this lunar eclipse. So this is really having us tap into the higher octave of Venus, which is Neptune. This is where we understand how connected we are. And it is through understanding that and that direct knowing. I feel like for America, it's the reckoning we're experiencing that's confronting us with this truth. But it is through that it really shifts the way that we relate to ourselves and then consequently to others, right? Um, this is also where, again, there are inspirations and clarification abundant during this time around what actions, Mars, you're needing to take. By the way, Mars is going to conjunct the North Node as well. Um, but which action you are meant to take in order um, to close this chapter, okay? It is where we can experience just the subtle shift in our attitude, understanding with Virgo Pisces that because they're mutable, there is adaptability within these archetypes, that we can adapt, we can pivot, we can change. It is really this dynamic of even the most minute little changes right now can have the biggest impact. Why? Because this has been a 19-year cycle. And remember, when you're finishing something up, that's where we feel maximum pressure because we're dotting I's and crossing T's and we're doing all the little things, all the little improvements. We're zoning in. And yet, with this lunation and it reflecting an ending of a karmic chapter, for each one of us on an individual level, it can be just the smallest thing, like an attitude change, a shift when you're tested right now, right? To mitigate crisis, to mitigate how you once operated, and that will truly show you that you're headed in this right direction. So there's an immense amount of not only clarification, but trust and faith in oneself, and really paying attention to the messages on an intuitive and instinctual level right now. And even if they seem like you're having doubts, Virgo, about it, to still cultivate that action. There are a lot of people right now that are experiencing this phenomenon. Like, I just thought about that, and yet, like, it's coming back up, and I didn't do it. And now it's made it clear to me that I need to do this thing. That's a Virgo Pisces thing, um, with the twist of Jupiter. And so this is teaching us that you can trust yourself, right? That you actually are more connected than you know. And it's because there's been this on a global level an emphasis on action and not interconnection. And so that's part of what we're building right now. This is a rebuild through this culmination, the rebuild that is happening is really infusing and trying to harmonize the masculine and feminine principles instead of doing this one too much or this one too much, because both are extremes. And it doesn't matter your gender, we all have this within us, okay? The way to discern correct action areas is through our intuition right now. That's this Mercury retrograde, Jupiter retrograde ruled by this lunation. And yet, Lucifer is hanging out with this moon, and Lucifer is retrograde. So, this can be the bearer of light for us. It gives us an opportunity to um, resolve these long-standing emotional dynamics. It can also really emphasize a emotional dynamic, especially if it hasn't been dealt with. If you've been denying, making excuses, um, keeping too busy instead of dealing with what it is that you need to deal with, it can really induce and trigger an immense amount of self-doubt, feeling inferior, and yet that is where you take that as the bearer of light. This is what's wanting to end. This is what's wanting to close. This is getting in the way. And so here's the choice I need to make. Here's the shift. Here's the pivot. Here's where I need to adapt in order to improve, in order to culminate this. That's where this happens. And that is how this structure is reforming right now. There's a rebuilding happening. Okay. I know a lot of people right now too, um, they're exhausted because it's reflecting how we're meant to get quiet right now, where we've been staying too busy doing all the things and not cultivating a structure that actually facilitates and nurturing us on an emotional, physical, psychological, and spiritual level. And so that can be highlighted. Extreme fatigue, anxiety, that is, it's being highlighted in order for us to what? To confront. So this lunation, again, I'm going to say it, it's highlighting where there is an over um, identification or an imbalance within the feminine and the masculine principles. What is highlighted is going to clue you in. On the flip side of over-identification with the, masculine principle, it can be the over-identification with the feminine principle. I am, you know, helping other people, but not helping myself. I am, um, being too internalized. I'm not going out. I'm not creating community in order to experience harmonization. It can be because of being afraid or not good enough. Again, core issues are Virgo, though, right? This is Virgo's what I call stinking thinking, or the committee upstairs that gets in the way of us taking the action that we're really needing to. But again, it's going to illuminate what it is that we're needing to change and to improve in order to culminate it. But it is going to come from listening to oneself, that Venus sextile Uranus. Jupiter is also sextiling um, this full moon, and that's really highlighting it's retrograde. It's also this other choice point, a review, a resolving of a dynamic stemming around our beliefs and how they impact our thinking and the messages that we give ourselves, of a negative critical nature or of a, doom and gloom, what I call Eeyore, nobody loves me kind of level, you name it. uh, it can highlight that, but yet it's also this aspect that is extremely helpful. There's a gift in this lunation, and Jupiter says you've got to let go of one dynamic, let it burn in the fire, right? Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces, and that will purify it. Virgo. And when you do that, you receive the gift. And how do you know what it is? Well, your emotions, Cancer, are going to be teaching you. They already have. What have you been intuiting that you need to do, that you need to let go of, that you need to surrender to, Pisces? That is here. Um, then, we have a trine happening between Jupiter and the Sun and Pallas Athene. It's going to perfect later on this week, but that is a very spiritual um, aspect. Again, it's inspiring, it's clarifying, it feels like something's received from on high, an aha, an understanding, a knowing, um, a new dream, a new vision. And it's also where we can be experiencing again that Virgo of I really feel inspired, but can I really do this? Am I good enough? Am I this? Am I that? And Mars is asking for us to implement that action again for that new structure to be forming, that new choice with Neptune there, hanging out with Saturn. And also, it is this dynamic of if you have a sincere intention, it's teaching us about our sincerity and our honesty when we choose to create an action in a sincere, honest, and authentic way. It opens up a new journey, Jupiter, and a new path for us to experience a deepening and an expanding of inspiration that is felt through our connection to something much larger. And so, if you've been wanting to experience that and you've put it off and you've made excuses and you haven't been committed, Virgo, this is a time where you can really start to feel the deepening of that call to implement a working structure for you to cultivate that. Like there's this choice here about what are you going to do to keep dismissing, putting off, or are you going to soar by setting a goal or an intention and following through with it? Because that is going to teach us more and more inner knowledge through that process. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And so this highlights that function. Um, Lots of clarity. So I'm going to shift gears here and I'm going to talk about this collective dynamic. There is a lot going on collectively. Um, what this is reflecting, this karmic chapter that wants to end, I would say even very specifically with America, since Pluto, I mean, since its Uranus is squaring the nodes during this lunation, is there's a lot of talk about cultural wars, political battles, and ideological conflict. America's Uranus and Gemini, right? It's the ruler of its moon, of its Lucifer, and of its south node. It's also Pluto's in Capricorn in the fifth house, just for um, an understanding. I'll post this chart in a minute. But so there's this over-identification of us framing everything as a political battle or a collective um, division, cultural um, wars, this or that, um, who's on the good side, the bad side, the this, the that. Um, and yes, these things are all going on, but they're actually just a symptom, but of what? And this is character crisis, but where does character crisis on a global and national level come from? It comes from the collapse of character. Things are collapsing. And the collapse of character, we see it um, on a, like I said, a national, global level. And then it is also reflected in the micro. It's the macro and the micro. That's why there's been so much talk about um, family systems that are narcissistic or, people with pathologies or, uh, I hear sociopaths, psychopaths. There's like these hot but buzzwords. There's a lot of people who have been exposing this, which has been really good actually, because it's educating people and helping to validate them. But what is that? That's actually a collapse of character. And this is this Virgo conjunct Lucifer dynamic during this lunation. It's highlighted. And it's because it's rooted in a overarching theme of victimization, falling into the sadistic dynamic, right? That side of victimization, the character collapse. Pluto and Aquarius is sextiling Saturn and Neptune during this full moon. And that is also speaking to the collapse of character, okay, on a global national level. This is where a collapse of character is going to highlight extremism. And extremism, it really happens because of an inability to hear exceptions to a particular worldview. And here's the thing, we see it on both sides. Politically, it's really, larger than ever. This reflects, it doesn't matter if you're on one side or the other. Are you extreme? Can you hear other worldviews, right? Are you curious about them? Are you wanting to understand? Are you wanting to bring moderation to it? I'm not saying that if someone is starting a war, that, you should be like, let me be patient with you and hear you out. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in order to mitigate some of what is happening, we're needing to cultivate a curiosity right now and critical thinking. And any extreme side of anything is going to have an inability to have critical thinking. There's going to be an inability to hear exceptions to their worldview, their outlook on something, or how they've defined something. Uranus and Gemini in America's chart is squaring this nodal axis. We've got Mercury and Pisces retrograde. So we are seeing this breakdown in communication. We are seeing people, even some that we know, or people that we see on YouTube, on channels, having a breakdown in their own mental constructs because of this dynamic. And it's creating instability, right? So it's the micro and the macro. Whatever is reflected in a particular consciousness on a national level, you're going to see it. It's because there's a top-down approach. Everything at the top, there's shit up there, it slides down to the bottom, right? Because it's infused. And there's a lot of people right now too that are having a breakdown in their communication and the over-identification with an extreme worldview of some type of way that can be on personal levels just feeling victimized and not wanting to hear anything else, right? Virgo. Um, and there is a sensitivity, Pisces. For some people, they can become very extreme right now. Um, because of this sensitivity, it can be a sensitivity to fear and loss of power, right? That can be one extreme, or it can be this sensitivity to injustices and then misusing power and anger, right? And then becoming the thing that you are feeling unjust about. This is that character collapse that we are seeing everywhere. Look around, observe. It is in the minutia everywhere. People that we once really admired or respected or gave a sense of authority to, we're seeing this because all of a sudden there's been that over-identification. And so there are these collapses in character. On a deeper level, this dynamic that is highlighted with this lunation, when we're talking about a collapse of character, those who are extreme really don't mind opposition. What they mind is moderation. They mind moderation. Moderation meaning the willingness to hear other worldviews, the willingness to critically think, the willingness to expand, the willingness to have interdependence, equal giving, sharing. It is moderation is one of the oldest things written throughout history, even back to um, animism and shamanism. It's the principle. Obviously, it couldn't be, written in a word, but there was the principle and the oral tradition of continuing to give this. And moderation is about temperance and patience and humility. And whenever we are coming against extreme um, dynamics and character crisis, there's that inability. And that is what really like chaps people's asses whenever they're in that extreme place. What is this reflecting? This is reflecting the distortions that are playing out because there is an imbalance with the masculine and the feminine principles right now. And we're needing to adapt and we're needing to heal and we're needing to discern and cultivate wisdom and more inner knowledge and to reconnect with this principle of moderation that is rooted in the balancing and the harmonization of this. And through that, new structures can be formed. Yet this is going to be a long process. And right now we are in the breakdown stage on a collective level. Personally, do your work because you're connected to the collective unconscious. And guess what? When you do your work, it helps to shift the vibration of the collective unconscious. And right now it needs it. So the doubts, the whatever, purge it so you can help even in that way that might be unseen. So when we are looking at this principle of moderation and temperance, which is a Virgo Pisces dynamic, um, the extremist sides are going to lack that ability. And what I mean by lacking that ability, it's like lacking the ability to utilize that knowledge, Virgo, Mercury, Gemini, in a proper, healthy way. Instead, it becomes distorted. So, this is the other thing that we're confronting right now with this lunation is that, yes, there are these things that are playing out in different nations and on a global level, and we link them to trauma and we link them to shame. But really, it goes back to it being about an excess in deficiencies, Virgo, um, of character. It's the excess of deficiencies in character right now. And why does this happen? Why does this moral collapse happen? Why does the character collapse happen? Why is there a character crisis going on? It's because this is rooted in too much entitlement, not enough self-reflection, lacking the ability to take accountability. It's where we shift blame because of the lack of accountability. Um, and this is that territory where things become extreme because moderation, temperance, humility speaks to and reflects to inclusion, interdependence, interrelatedness. It speaks to self-reflection, accountability, even objectivity, right? And so this is what is highlighted. It is a character collapse, Virgo, Aquarius dynamics. And we are seeing the excesses happen and the wars that are going on and the delusionary beliefs. And there is a reckoning. There is something that is closing. And yet we had the Aquarius solar eclipse that was speaking about the new evolutionary cycle wanting to start. And it really highlighted community and interdependence. We have a lot of dynamics coming up that are going to be coming up over the next month and especially the next 2 weeks. Whenever I look at this lunation dealing with character collapse, there are going to be things. Cassandra is in Taurus, ruled by Venus and Pisces. There are going to be themes, in my opinion. Okay, I could be wrong, but this is what I see reflected in the archetypes. But there will be more themes of people speaking truth and it being dismissed, not believed, heard. It'll be can be denied, and especially around survival, Taurus, and resources. and the misuse of resources or the intentions why people are doing what they're doing to gain resources, right? We're going to see leadership, in my opinion, um, having that psychological, mental collapse because there has been an excess that they have not dealt with. And eventually it takes a toll when we deny, dismiss all the Virgo things and suppress Saturn, something. Eventually Pluto comes a knocking, and there is something that triggers a confrontation, an exposing of the actual reality of the situation. And even for Americans right now, there's going to be more exposure. Things that we don't even know about are going to be revealed to confront us, right? This is the Pisces dynamic. We have Lucretia in Scorpio, ruled by Pluto, making a grand water trine with Jupiter and the Sun and Pallas Athene. So there is like a lot of exposing, even around, and Lucretia deals with um, exposing of government structures, oftentimes, or just structures. So it can even be family. And it is believed, but yet there is a punishing dynamic or a self-punishing dynamic whenever Lucretia isn't naturally expressed because there's been an internalization of value associations about speaking truth even if it's heard. It's like feeling guilty for the truth even being acknowledged, Virgo. Um, but yet we have Pallas Athene conjunct the Sun with this trine. Jupiter is retrograde in this grand water trine. So there's the more of the exposing and the punishment or the exposing of punishment in general. And what I will say is with Pallas there, it can even be about people, intelligence, right? Um, Pallas is the octave transformer of Mercury and Uranus. So this can even be um, secret intelligence, or it can also be punishing someone for having a certain type of intelligence. We could even see this play out, people in their jobs. Someone is starting to treat you differently because they feel threatened, Scorpio, because you have an intelligence that they are lacking, right? And so there can be this dynamic of trying to punish for something that's inherent and natural and authentic, Jupiter. And yet that becomes on personal levels to not internalize what's being projected, but to use Pallas as a shield to deflect that and understand that that's really about them. And that can also be highlighting if there's things going on in the workplace around these dynamics. This might be the thing that's having you close that chapter in order to move forward, in order to culminate that and do something that feels more inspirational or that you've really been wanting to do on a career level where you can actually use your own creative intelligence to execute it, right? It's also just where we can be on a collective level coming up with inspirational ideas as a way to mitigate and continue to expose what is being dismissed and denied, where there are actions being taken by the powers that be to keep us in a state of confusion. Um, I also want to say Lucifer conjunct this node. I know I said it already, but it's also sextile Lucretia. The influence of evil, Lucifer, can really come in right now and do some wonky things as a way to punish others. And yet, Lucretia exposes and is catalytic. And the exposing can be shocking. Pluto and Aquarius ruling that. And yet, those who utilize punishment as a form to subjugate and suppress others right now, Virgo, it backfires and it has been backfiring because it brings people together and people are tired. So there's more themes of this being highlighted. And the question becomes, why? Why right now? What is wanting to close? It's that. How did we get in this place? We lacked discernment. We wanted to be saved by authority. We, the people, the community, we didn't utilize um, our collective authority. We gave it away and we misused our collective power, right? So there are no innocent parties right now. We're also learning that our choices impact everyone else, and that reflects that natural principle of interdependency. And so, if we are really wanting to be cosmic citizens or people rooted in humanity, Aquarius, there needs to be this shift and this understanding that we are all interconnected. Pisces. Pandora is forming a yod. Pandora is in Libra retrograde, forming a yod with Uranus and also Venus. This again is reflecting the extremes playing out because of the lack of the harmonization of masculine and feminine principles and the need for us to liberate from the over-identification, Uranus, value associations, Venus, and where we're needing to culminate that, Venus and Pisces ruling both in order to harmonize, but yet we're re-experiencing the crisis. This is also crisis happening because there's an inability to hear each other. There's not the moderation. There's only opposition, right? Um, at this time. And opposition um, to for arguing's sake is what I'm talking about is extreme, right? Moderation comes in the form whenever there's an opposition that comes together collectively, listens to each other despite what's going on, despite what group they're in, but they do something together for the betterment of all. And that is actually really reflected in that Pandora forming a yod. There's the trigger. It's 28 degrees. Um, and so it's going to be triggered pretty soon by Chiron. All right. Whenever it hits that 28 degrees, it's also going to be triggered by, Ceres. So there's food for thought. That becomes where there can be a stabilization if we make the choice to throw off the past dynamics, right? On a collective level. I will say Pandora is trining Medusa and Vesta. And so this is having us really continue to commit to community and understanding that there's unity and diversity and that there is wisdom, Medusa, that is creative, Medusa, and that we don't need to exile or be in exile or feel that we can't do what it is that we need to do on a global humanitarian collective level. There is a lot of feminine energy reflected in these transits that is reflecting the help, the unseen Piscean help. And that is why I say, really understand that we are all connected. And even if it's just an attitude change, something very small, it can shift. It changes the flavor of the pie, Pluto and Aquarius. It transforms it in order for the collective as a whole to start having healthier types of consciousness connected. And more people coming online in the sense of initiating that improvement and taking the action around the inspiration and not doing what we once did, and yet how that really feeds, nurtures in a loving, compassionate way to the whole. It is a supreme form of giving. All right. So this is your lunar eclipse. I'm like so tired right now. I'm like, I've been, you know, I'm not even gonna go into it, but you can see it in my eyes. I feel it in my eyes. I'm glad that I was able to do this. I'm glad I feel like I got some help and some energy. And I am so sorry that this was late. Lastly, if you are wanting to understand these energies and you're feeling them, I would be remiss to not bring up that I do have my my upcoming 5 week series workshop um, that is going over these five asteroids: Medusa, Lilith, Pandora, Lucretia, and Cassandra, and really helping us to understand the lack of moderation within both principles and how we are meant to stabilize and recover and harmonize with them. I will be teaching about this. I will be teaching about the myths and the archetypes and how to utilize it in your natal chart, what it's reflecting right now, and really going into a deep dive with each one of these. There's more information on my website. I will post the link in the description. It is open to, I think there's 7 or 6 more spots left. It's $111. That is over 10 hours of teachings. And if you can't make the live class, you'll still get the recording and the PDF of the presentation. Um, so there's that. So if you're wanting to really understand this and you feel connected to these energies, um, and you can, sign up for it. I'd love to see you, and interact with you. And there's nothing left. Um, thank you all. Please have grace for yourself. Please let us continue to bring love into the world right now, and empathy and compassion, not misuse it, but to be discerning with how we wield our own personal power. And it can be scary to watch the moral collapse that's going on. And there are people that I deeply care about that I even see it going on with them as well. And so this is a call to not judge. It's a call to see what it is that you can do in order to help promote healing. That doesn't mean put yourself in harm's way. This is still a lunation about discernment and correct judgment. But if you have a sincere intention and desire to know what it is that you can do, ask. And your intuition will kick in. The message will be given to you when it is needed and necessary in time. And then your responsibility is to just act on it and to trust yourself. Okay? These are the gifts of this lunation. The restructuring and the rebuild from within is happening even with collapse around. Yet we're still having to culminate some things right now on personal levels. So happy Virgo lunar eclipse, my friends.